Never miss the latest videos from the people who help you play better golf. Hit subscribe here. All right, I'm here with Tom. He is the VP of R&D for Cobra. I haven't screwed that up yet. That's a lot of letters though, Tom. I want to talk about your irons and then maybe even specifically about some one-length stuff. I got a one-length set last year just to try it. I wanted to try this shaft because it says money taper on it. I thought that was cool. And it's black, but mainly the design and just trying a single length set of irons was compelling to me. I thought these were awesome, but now you've got a new version of a single length iron that you're offering with the LTDx. And that'll come in the standard configuration, but also one length. So tell me what you've learned about one length in the last few years. Anything compelling, or have you changed your design at all?
Well, it was one of these, we talked a little bit about Bryson. One of the first things that happened with Bryson for us was he came to Carlsbad and actually was on his recruiting trip. So he came to us and he went to TaylorMade and Callaway and Titleist, and I'm sure he went to Karsten in Arizona.
Oh, I'm sure he did. Yep, he was scoping it out.
So, he was recruiting us, we were recruiting him. So part of the fun was when we started the conversations, our CEO at the time, Bob Fillion, he said, hey, what do you think about this one length thing? It's like single length at the time. We hadn't created the phrase one length, but single length. And I said, oh, well, I know that they were made a long time ago. In fact, I knew the man who hired me at Titleist was a guy by the name of John Hoflick, noted club designer. And he at Tommy Armour had launched something called the EQL, which was single length back in the late 80s, which was even before I got in the industry. So I went, and John and I have a great relationship. We've kept in touch, and I probably see him every couple months having lunch and hanging out. We talked about the original, design and the idea of single length. And he said, hey, it works for lots of people. He says, certainly there's industry, I would say friction or inertia in resisting it, but it works. And so we did some quick clubs here and made sets. And we actually had our R&D team go out and play 9 holes. I said, you guys go play 9 holes, and I want you to come back and give me a report. How do they work? What would you change? What would you not change? And it was very interesting because we had about 18 people do that in the first 2 weeks after that conversation we had. And it came back about a third of them right away said, I play these right now. They're actually helping my game. A third of them said, I'm never going to play these. And a third of them said, yeah, I might play the long irons or the short irons, or we can make some tweaks. I think we can fix this, et cetera, et cetera. So our early learning was, without a preconceived notion, they actually work quite well for a number of people. And so what we did was we went in and we started making them that first year when right after we signed Bryson, we got them into the market because we felt like there was going to be a lot of buzz. And it was great. That year, we actually got to number 4 in the iron market share in 2017. So it was a great benefit for us. Now, the original first year was about 40% one length versus variable length in the same set. It's still been tracking in the mid 30s for us all these years because we know that when golfers want to have more consistency, one length is a great way to do that. It's very consistent because you have the same swing, same setup. We find you don't actually have the same swing, but you have the same setup every time.
Yeah, that's what I kind of wanted to hit at there was, so I feel like if I'm playing these, I'm making basically the same swing. The longer irons, I might swing a mile or two faster. I'm not really trying to, but I'm wondering if your player testing on amateurs in general showed something different than that. So to lay this out for those watching, the idea with one length, if you were going to be a real purist, is you would swing them all the same. You'd have the same shaft, the same head weights, the same swing weights, the same length clubs, and you would swing them the same RPMs or the same miles per hour. That's the real trick and secret to one length, is you need to be skilled enough to do that. But I doubt players really do that. When they stand over a 4-iron, likely they're going to swing faster because the shot just has to go farther and they don't have the command over that kind of skill. Does that seem fair? And does that match your assessment?
Yes, very much so. And one of the things we learned early on in working with Bryson was, okay, Bryson came to us and said, well, if these clubs are all the same length, why do I swing them different speeds? And so that was an interesting conversation. Now, Bryson, usually when he comes to us, his college education was in physics. And the difference between physics and engineers is physics are usually more about the why, and really a deep thinking process there, where the engineers like not always cared about the why. It's just, hey, here's what works from testing, and let's go use it. That's the difference. So when Bryson comes in, why do I swing them different speeds? And his theory was it was aerodynamics. So that was an interesting conversation we had briefly. And one of our guys, in fact, our VP of Innovation, Mike Yagley, is an aerodynamicist who worked at Boeing and has been in golf on the golf ball side of the industry for as long as I've been in clubs, or almost as long. So, when Mike looked at these, he said, I don't think so. If you look at the things that aerodynamicists looked at are frontal area, and then the edges and the drag and the bluff bodies and all that kind of stuff. So he looked at them and did some quick modeling and said, no, there's not much difference. So we kind of went back with our engineering theory and said, well, we think you swing them the same because you have a brain and your brain sees golf clubs. And when you see a golf club that looks like a pitching wedge, you have a different goal in mind than when you see a golf club that looks like a 4-iron. And so your golfer brain says, go ahead.
There's so much history that goes into that as a player, so that when you stood over a pitching wedge for your entire life, you never really tried to hit it that hard. Grab your 4-iron, and there's never a time when you really weren't trying to hit it hard. So I am neither a physicist or an engineer. I have a marketing degree, barely, from a Division II school. But it's not aerodynamics. It's the intent of people. So I get why you would change these. I'm interested in that evolution, how you change it. Because I did notice, even on my set, which with these shafts, it's really hard to see that A step, the very first one that you would get. But progressively with the 4-iron, the A step is much higher. So I can see how you're building that around the person. And not making all the shafts the same, not making all the line angles the same. So
so a couple other things that are really interesting when you talk about working with Bryson. So when Bryson came in, he said, I want all of them to have 7-iron shafts. And we're like, because he had the theory, they have to be all the same club. And we thought about that a little bit, and we did some early testing, and we found out, well, maybe that's not the best. And we kind of suggested him. Now, what happened was he kept complaining about the long iron's going too low and the short iron's going too fast. And I said, well, what do you think would happen if you put a 7-iron shaft in your 4-iron? What's the difference is? He said, it's stiffer and it probably goes lower. And so through him learning from engineers, we're like, well, maybe I should try different shafts like the set normally has throughout my set. And when he switched that, I was like, solve some of the problems. So I think that's the one thing we learned early on is, because your intent is different, because your CGs of your heads are different, it affects the club and the way it bends the shaft dynamically. So when you think of a pitching wedge, most people think of a pitching wedge, it's okay, it's a scoring club, but they don't realize that a pitching wedge CG is further back than a long iron CG. So when it's further back, it deflects the shaft more. And so that's interesting when you think of a human swinging the golf club from a feel perspective, a dynamics perspective. So one of the things we had to do early on, after the first year, we started putting 1-length clubs in our fitting carts. And so that was kind of a neat trick that we came up with, is we put a 5-iron head in the fitting cart and a 9-iron head. So you can easily try the 1-length and had a pretty quick way to say, hey, hit the 7-iron, hit the 5, and hit the 9. If you don't see 20-yard gaps between those two clubs, you're probably not a good candidate for 1-length. So that was an easy experiential tool to help us. And what we did with that, because it's a fitting cart head, we had the ability to make them, standard and upright settings and standard and flat in the short irons. And we found that very quickly, because of this CG to the 1-length shaft effect, you are having to probably see some adjustments needed. And we did that by adjusting the line angles. So we adjusted the line angles on the sets more upright in the long irons and flatter in the short irons, because then the dynamics of the heads CGs work well with the shaft lengths and the shafts to make the club more consistent. And that's what we were trying to provide, was that consistency of swing, strike, and then obviously your target.
And qualitatively, I would say that the biggest benefit I found out of these was one I wasn't really expecting. It was in the longer clubs. I stopped these ForgeTech irons at the 5-iron, because the 4-iron and 5-iron, with the particular shafts I had, I couldn't carry the distances, the carry-wise wasn't appropriate for gapping it well. But the longer clubs, the 5-6 iron, I found I hit those tremendously better than my previous set of just what you would consider the standard incremental length. So on my end, I thought that was impressive. And you could still, even if you don't use one length perfectly appropriately, which I don't know if Bryson even does, the shorter clubs like a pitching wedge, I might still hold that a little lower on the shaft if I had to have some more command over what I wanted to do or take some speed off of it. So I found these really versatile, and on the end of the bag I wasn't expecting, found some improvement. Do you feel like that's fair for good players or tour players that you're testing these with?
Yeah, I think it really depends on a lot of things, and usually it's the trajectory of your shots. We found that players who tend to hit the ball on the higher side typically don't have an issue when you go to one length long irons. They seem to work fine. They're still flying appropriate, so they still play well. When you have players who are lower flight players, usually they don't work well with an iron at a one length, and that's because you can't move the CG back far enough. Our solution for that, which was kind of interesting, the first year we didn't have time to get hybrids done in one length. So with the F7, there were no hybrids, but with F8s, we made hybrids. And so the hybrid has a natural ability because of the head shape to have that CG lower and further back. So the hybrids work extremely well in one length for the players who are more height challenged on their shots.
Yep. No, it makes a ton of sense, and I think it's a cool concept for sure. So then I use these Forge Techs maybe like 3 times last year. I don't play enough golf time. They look brand new. Some of them I might not have even hit. But I know you're going to potentially maybe make something new on this end. But I want to talk about your LTDx Iron. So that's one that I did see at the really rainy, nasty demo day this year in Orlando. But I want to hear you talk about that because I've gotten no insight on what that iron's like and who you made that for.
Well, like you said, we can't vote one child better than the other, but we love these irons. They're the game improvement irons, really the meat of the market. And one of the things we keep learning every year is this golfer always wants everything. He wants distance and forgiveness and easy to hit launch and hold greens and accuracy and feel. That's kind of the 5 things that people always want in their iron. So we have to design our structures in our heads to do all those things. So one of the great things about it, as you heard a little bit from the metals, is the power core technology is also alive and well in the irons. And so I actually have the cutaway part here that shows the power core, and you can see that bar that runs from the heel and toe is actually not touching the face. Okay, it's separate from the face, and so that power core is weight low and forward, and that weight low and forward gives us the best ability to get the shots up in the air. You want the lowest CG you can get, but you also want to spread that weight heel to toe. So that's where the power core is a great structure and an improvement over what we have been doing in the past. And then we match that up with our power shell face. You can see that sort of L-shaped section there. This face gets better every year. We make it thinner, stronger, a little bit wider flange at the bottom here so we get more flex. And because when we put it into the head, it's not touching the power core, it actually flexes even more. So that's much closer to the structures you see on drivers and metalwoods. So you're trying to design it to get the maximum benefit at the impact point.
Yep, and you beat my follow-up question, which was because that power core doesn't touch the face, you can flex the face like a driver. But I explained that probably quite a bit with drivers and haven't seen maybe the cutaway like an iron there you've built this to really flex the face. So explain maybe just the engineering behind, you want the face to flex, but you also want that to regain its structure really quickly, so you add a little ball speed. Can you sum that up a little better than what I just did?
No, I think you did it pretty well, but I'll add a couple of points to that. One of the things is you think about our structure, we're trying to design them, like a metalwood or like a tennis racket. Tennis racket has a pretty strong frame and flexible strings. Now we're trying to do all this with metal, so it's not quite as flexible. But what we've learned, the science of impact physics learned about 20 years ago when we first started talking about driver COR, was that if you squish the ball less, it actually comes off with more speed. So that's the one thing that we're trying to do with all these structures is not squish the ball as much, because a ball is an elastic element. The more you squish it, the more you lose speed. So these compliant structures nowadays are designed to be flexible enough with metal so you don't quite squish the ball as much, but you still impart the forgiveness and the speed to it. without having a ball energy loss is what it is.
Yeah, so that's a great point.
So that's the real
if you want ball speed, one of the biggest features that are built into pretty much every club now, and it's really tracking its way down to his irons like you. Flex the face, don't let the ball deform, try to limit those features, and poof, you've got a recipe for a rocket launcher. I noticed there's a little difference on the toe, like looking at my ForgeTech irons here. You've got a screw in there now, it looks like.
Yeah, that's we call it a weight screw. That's basically allows us the ability to fine tune the weights of these clubs. One of the things we know, as you guys have seen and driven that growth, is fitting is much more important than it's ever been. And it continues to be more important and continue to grow. And so what we want to do is give you, the fitters, better tools to help you dial in the club. So we have the ability to adjust for shaft and length and things like that. And also allows us the fine tuning ability to make our clubs consistent to the required swing weight that the golfer is requesting. So we didn't have that in our game improvement clubs before. So in LTDx, that gives us a great capability of fitting. The other thing that we've also done, one of the things we've learned from the fitters loudly and clearly is we have to make our irons bendable in the field. And so that was the one thing that we did change the metals in these designs to a 431 alloy, which is more ductile than 17.4. The good thing is, we have a very strong face material because you want the strongest face, but you don't necessarily want the strongest bending structure. So that's the challenge of the designs, is how do we get the best performance overall from a standpoint of speed, from a standpoint of the fitters being able to bend these clubs and dial them in for golfers, and performance back into sound, feel, and forgiveness.
Yeah, well, thanks for talking about irons. I'm excited for those for sure. And if you enjoyed this, we talked about the drivers in a different video, so go ahead and check that one out. I forgot to ask you a question about this. So you used the sideways 8 on this one. Did you try any other letters? Did any of them go any faster than one another? Right here?
Well, that's
Like
a good one. That's actually the
3?
infinity. That's the
Infinity. Oh, no, this is a sideways 8 time. Sorry, you did it wrong. No, but thanks for talking about irons, one length, LTDx. That stuff's exciting. So great job building these, and thanks.